Coming soon from SJS Direct, Spellbound, a darker shade of black. I'm looking at this so-called gentrification that's going on all across the country in inner city areas, and I look at it and I see another housing market bubble that is getting ready to pop. Why do I believe that this is another housing market bubble that's getting ready to pop? Because there are several factors that people really aren't looking at. You see, you have all these real estate developers trying to build up inner city neighborhoods and turn them into high priced luxury housing. However, we look at the economy overall and it's not in very good shape. We look at the job market and it's not producing the kind of workers who will be able to afford any of this luxury housing. I mean, you have all these guys building $1 million condominiums in places like New York City and many other parts of the country, and your average worker these days who comes out of college can't even find a $9 an hour job. So if we do the math, things just aren't adding up. How does a guy with a $9 an hour job or an $11 an hour job be able to afford a $1 million condominium? Once you do that math, you see a wreck getting ready to come for the American economy. There's another housing market bubble. Sadly, most Americans just can't connect the dots to see another housing market bubble getting ready to pop. And they can't see that if your workers are making low wages, they cannot afford to buy these condominiums. They can't afford to rent apartments that cost $4,000 and $5,000 a month. Their wages just don't support that type of residence. And these developers are living in a world that many of the people when I was a teenager, were dealing with in the comic book industry. Now, a lot of people don't understand what happened in the comic book industry back in the 1990s, but there was a similar speculator boom. During this speculator boom, we had a lot of comic book publishers catering to these speculators, and they were printing up hundreds and thousands and even millions of copies of comic books, and the collectors were hoarding them, stacking them up, thinking that there was going to be a big payday. However, what gave the comic books their value was in actuality was scarcity, and they were scarce due to the World War II paper drives and the fact that many parents threw away old comic books. So the first appearance of a character like a Captain America, a Superman, or a Batman was very rare because a lot of people threw those comics away, and to find a pristine mint copy, that was like a needle in a haystack. You might find a battered one, and that one would cost you a couple of $1,000 because there weren't that many out there. I mean, even the first appearance of the Submariner, there's only like 6 or 7 copies known in the world. So finding old Golden Age comics, what gave them value was there was a limited supply and a huge demand. But when I look at the housing market, I'm looking at the supply of luxury housing getting bigger, and I'm looking at the demand, and it's going to get smaller because the number of people who have millions of dollars to buy a luxury home or a condo is small in proportion to the amount of units that are being added to the nation's market every day. And what I'm seeing is with this whole luxury housing bubble that many of these developers are getting on, we're going to reach something in economics called a saturation point. What is a saturation point? A saturation point is when you put out so much of a product that that the value of it starts to decrease instead of increase because you have such a large supply of product that supply of product exceeds demand. And that's what I'm seeing going to happen in the American housing market. There's not enough housing for middle class Americans. What we have is a glut of luxury housing, and I'm seeing the rents that are up there, they're so high that even some of the upper middle class people can't afford them. Because I walk down areas like Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue here in New York, and every retail outlet I see has for rent signs in it, which is telling me that the market is getting ready to hit a crash because this is supposed to be prime real estate. It's supposed to be easy to rent, and I've seen for rent signs in many stores for a year, year and a half, and a lot of these guys, again, are speculating like the comic book collectors were, believing that the market is going to, continue to expand, continue to grow, and they're going to have big money to cash out on. And what's going to happen is These guys don't see the end game coming to them. They don't see that we're reaching saturation point, because if you're gentrifying all these neighborhoods and you're bringing up the value of all these neighborhoods, you're increasing the supply of luxury housing and luxury areas and luxury retail areas. So you're increasing that supply, but again, your demand is very small because there aren't that many millionaires in the world. I mean, there are not that many. There are some people who will pretend that they are millionaires by putting all their assets together, but there are not people who can go out here and spend $5,000 a month on rent, or again, $2 or $3 million to buy a condo, and especially in areas all over the country. If you have them all over the country, you're going to have a glut in the marketplace, and that glut eventually is going to lead to another market crash. And a lot of people are not looking at the big picture regarding real estate long term. Then this is what caused the first housing bubble to crash in 2008. But people are still going on, still thinking that they can continue going on like this. But I see the wreck getting ready to come, and I see it clear as day to me, because I say to myself, if you're gentrifying New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and every other city in the country, and you're building large units of luxury housing all across the country, that cost $1 million a piece all over the country, who's going to buy all this property? I'm sure there are millionaires all across the globe, but they cannot buy every piece of property across an entire country, nor would they be able to finance it. And with your own American workers, wages have been stagnating for 20 years and are now starting to drop, you don't have a large group of people to go out here and buy things. Sure, you have a short-term surge from what they call these trust fund babies, but eventually their money is going to start drying up, because I see a lot of these so-called trust fund babies, they're blowing their money in high-risk businesses like restaurants and other businesses like this, where one bad season can pretty much kill you. And some of these guys are out here smoking weed in K2, so I don't look at their money as surviving long-term. The hipster dollar is a short dollar. And I'm looking at the real estate, and I see a market that's getting ready to, hit a wall. Unfortunately, most Americans, they can't see the wall that's coming in front of them. They can't see that you are starting to build a glut of property that's high end, but you don't have enough middle class housing. So you have a large supply for a small group, but for the group that would have pretty much made you profits, you don't have any units at all. So I'm seeing where this is going to hit a wall, and we're going to see another market collapse, because a lot of these guys, what they're doing by creating all this luxury housing is they're inflating the value of property. And when you inflate the value of property, that makes the tax assessors raise the property tax rates. And when they raise the property tax rates and people aren't able to pay the property tax rates, that prevents revenue from coming into a municipality like a city or a state. And when they can't get revenue, that leads to problems later on. That's what led to the housing market collapse here in New York City in the 70s. It was that they kept raising the taxes and people started abandoning property. And I see this same type of bubble getting ready to pop and causing that type of decline. But sadly, a lot of people looking at gentrification, thinking about, all these people are going to be moving. But eventually, they're not going to be able to afford to sustain it, because once you've raised the property tax rate higher and people have to pay for this high property tax rate, and then they have to pay insurance and maintenance, and then you have more units than actual people to afford them, you're looking at a situation that's going to deteriorate very quickly from an economic perspective. And a lot of people aren't looking at the economics, going on regarding this housing market, and they're not looking at how that relates to the average American. Again, if the average American worker cannot afford to buy homes in a local area, then you're really stuck, because again, the average American worker is the one who's going to be bringing the revenue back to the city through not only through their property taxes, but through sales taxes and other taxes, and they bring revenue in. And a lot of these guys are thinking that these millionaires, which are a handful of people, a lot of these guys don't pay taxes, so that means there's no revenue coming in. If they're foreign outside, they don't pay taxes either, or they don't pay as much taxes as a working Joe. So I'm looking at the housing market, and a lot of people aren't connecting the dots and how the middle class and the lower classes relate to the economy overall and their impact on the economy. They're thinking that this gentrification bubble is going to keep going and keep going strong. Summer's big real estate boom is going to continue, but I see the end getting ready to come for it, and I see an end coming to this whole gentrification thing, and it's just not going to be a pretty picture for anyone. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.